What's up, fight fans? Welcome to episode number 17, I believe, of Fight Nerds. My name is Flying Brian J, and my co-host, as usual, is Wesley Riddle. You can follow him on Twitter at AllThatMMA. You can like him on Facebook. His Facebook page's name is All That MMA as well. Follow me on Twitter at Flying Brian J. Facebook it's facebook.com/Flying Brian Show. But what's up, Wes?
What's happening? I'm just hanging out for right now. I was talking to you before, so I love doing breakdowns and talking them with you. You're one of my best friends, but one thing I hate is missing UFC cards, and I'm unfortunately going to be missing this UFC card this weekend.
Yeah, and of course, Wes, you're talking about UFC on Fox 25 or hashtag UFC Long Island. I did a beer pairing video already for it, Wes, so I chose Distill. It's called Counterclockwise. It's a Berliner Weiss. It's a sour beer. But I got to thinking about it today. I should have paired it with a Long Island iced tea, right?
I feel like that would have been perfect for the theme. But you know what? I mean, I kind of like sour beers. I'm not against that, so I kind of like your choice on that one. But then again, a Long Island, being at Long Island, I feel like it kind of maybe would have gone a little bit better. But I still like your choice.
Do you know why I chose Counterclockwise, a sour beer?
I'm not sure. What for?
Because Chris Weidman's career is going counterclockwise.
I didn't say it because I didn't think you were going to say it, but I actually thought of that.
And also, since May of 2015, his career has kind of soured.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So anyway, Wes and I are going to start at the top with Chris, the All-American Weidman versus Kelvin, on a mission for gold. Gastelum, all the way down to the first fight of the night, which is Frankie Perez versus Chris Wade. The best part of this fight card, Wes, I know you can't watch it because you're going to be at work, which I know sucks. But for a lot of people, it's awesome because the main card is on regular Fox, Big Fox. You can get these last four fights with just a pair of old-fashioned telescoping bunny ears. How neat is that?
That's pretty sweet. I like the Fox cards. I feel like one of the things that they do for these is stack up, especially the main card, and I really enjoy a good main card, especially that's free. And this one, the four fights, one of them I feel like maybe shouldn't really be there, but you know what? I feel like there's a reason they put them on there, and I'm talking about Pat Cummins, Gian, Villante. That still could be a good fight, but it could be a little boring if Cummins wrestles. But Gian being training partners with Chris Weidman and best friends, I feel like that's one of the reasons. But still, I think the main card is pretty good, could produce quite a bit of violence.
So, yeah, you mentioned the main card's pretty cool, but give me your letter grade for the entirety of it. Perez, Wade, all the way up to Weidman, Gastelum. What letter grade are you going to give it?
Man, we were talking about this off air a little bit, and I was thinking about leaning a B, and I'm tempted to change it a little bit. I did give a B-, I think, to the last card that we had, Nelson Ponzinibbio. But this one's a pretty decent card. I feel like there's some great fights that could produce quite a bit of violence. The biggest one on the card that stands out to me that's a little bit underrated, Shane Burgos, Godofredo Pepe, could be a fantastic 1 or 2 round fight. If it goes the distance, then still I feel like it could be pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and give it a B. I'm going to stick with what I said beforehand. I think there's some pretty good fights. We got Eryk Anders making his debut in the UFC. Brian Kelleher coming back after a pretty big upset in his last fight, fighting Marlon Vera. And Jimmie Rivera, Thomas Almeida is another great fight on there too. Plus Darren Elkins fighting Dennis Bermudez. There's some pretty good fights that I feel like could be exciting for us to watch.
Yeah, I agree. There's a few that could be pretty damn exciting. And I'm really looking forward to Weidman versus Gastelum and Jimmie Rivera versus Tominhas Almeida. Those two fights, Wes, those are crackerjacks. There's a lot of them, though, that I just couldn't care about. I couldn't give two fucks about, honestly. Sorry for cursing, but so balancing it out, I'm coming in at a B-. I was going to go with a C+, but I'm going to go with a B-, and I do great on a curve. If this were happening on a Sunday afternoon, so my buddy Wes here could watch it, and also it could get over at a really early time, I could have the rest of my day to spend with my girlfriend, I would give it a B+, but, you know, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So speaking of somebody who probably didn't have a Merry Christmas, nah, he probably did, but I was just doing a stupid segue. Let's talk about Chris, the All-American Weidman versus Kelvin Gastelum. The little man, the former welterweight, the short guy, 5'9", is -155. I'm talking about Kelvin Gastelum. We come back on Chris, the All-American Weidman, +145. I believe the last time you and I talked, Wes, I took the first prediction. I'm going to let you have this time. Who you got main event?
Oh, man. I have been kind of back and forth on this one, but ultimately, in the end, I'm actually going Kelvin Gastelum, and I'll give a couple reasons why. I'll kind of talk about Chris Weidman a little bit too. The man is, I feel like, still kind of underrated with his abilities. In his fight with Gegard Mousasi, definitely was a controversial ending, but he had a great first round, was able to go out there, implement a lot of takedowns, and actually at one point I think he had a pretty deep guillotine choke. I think his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is pretty underrated for being with Matt Serra and Renzo Gracie. And then, of course, being a wrestler like he is, he's got quite a bit of potential. But there's a couple things that concern me in picking him, especially in a 5-round fight. And you're probably, I think we'll pretty much say the same thing. Chris Weidman does not really have the best gas tank. A lot of his fights, he seems to fall off and lose as the fight goes on. Actually, his last 3 fights, didn't lose any in the first round, but he lost in the 4th round of Luke Rockhold, fell quite a bit as the fight went on. Yoel Romero got knocked out in the 3rd, and Gegard Mousasi slowed down tremendously in that 3rd round as well. Plus, I remember the Lyoto Machida fight in the 4th or 5th round. I think Machida started to take over. So as that fight went on, we saw Machida start to take the momentum. Weidman had slowed down a little bit. Maybe it gets a little bit too aggressive with those takedowns. But another thing that concerns me in picking him is that he's currently riding that 3-fight losing streak. And he's fighting another guy that's ranked in the top 10 of the middleweight division in Kelvin Gastelum, who seems to be on quite a bit of a climb. So I feel like this might not be the best matchmaking choice for Chris Weidman. But then again, it's still a great main event. I'm picking Kelvin Gastelum in the end because this is a 5-round fight. Kelvin Gastelum seems to get quite a bit better as the fights go on, as we saw in the Tim Kennedy fight, as we saw in the Johnny Hendricks fight. He had a pretty good performance. And then even in the Neil Magny fight, back when he fought at welterweight, he started to pour it on in that 4th round, debatably got a 10-8 round, and was able to come back to just lose a split decision, but he had a very, very strong showing there late. He does have some holes in his grappling and his wrestling defense, which may pose a problem in those earlier rounds. But what I think we'll see happen is that Chris Weidman takes maybe those first 2, Gastelum takes round 3, round 4, and round 5, and at some point maybe in that time gets a finish. My ultimate pick is going to be Kelvin Gastelum. I've got him picked by a 3rd-round knockout.
Oh, 3rd round now. I thought right before the show you had him at 4th, Wes, so you're got even more confident in Kelvin?
After talking a little bit, but I thought I said 3rd and 4th, and I was like, well, you're going to be picking 4th, and I don't want to tie you on picks. Okay, so right. I got to make it a little better because you edged me out by about 50 points last week.
Yeah, but you're way ahead of me on the UFC pick'em, so I've got a little bit of catching up to do. Maybe I'll just go ahead and pick Chris Weidman to get the victory. But no, I think that you said a lot of great things. You mentioned Chris is on that 3-fight losing streak, all by KO or TKO. I don't like that his last one was just in April. That's not good. That's not a really good sign. And I know that it was controversial and the finish, maybe the fight could have gone on or whatever, but you add it all together, the 3-fight losing streak, all via finish. And he seemed, even in the first round against Mousasi, that when he got hit, he's kind of like, oh, man, I don't know about this. And anytime somebody gets finished, I think they should take a little bit of time off, at least 6 months, but that was just in April, so just 3 months ago that he got finished by the Moose. I know that early on, Weidman could get the better of Gastelum with his wrestling. That's very, very possible. Tim Kennedy got the better of Gastelum with his wrestling a little bit, was unable to do anything with it, controlled Gastelum on the ground a little bit, but I think Chris Weidman is a little bit underappreciated in his striking. Yes, he knocked out Anderson Silva, so let's all shed a tear for that, of course. He's got a great left hook, but he also throws some good strikes to the body. He could use some teeps to the body, some front kicks to Gastelum's body to keep him at range early on. His striking fundamentals are really good. He presses forward. He uses good range early, but he's mostly a pressure fighter, and Gastelum's a pressure fighter too. We're going to get a push to get a push. Gosh, I just don't think that Weidman's going to be able to last much past the 2nd round. Against Romero, he was the more tired fighter, even going into the 2nd round against Yoel Romero, who's known for gassing. He's looked tired in the 3rd round of all of his last 3 fights and his last 3 losses, of course. Gastelum, really good at shifting in, shifting out, using footwork to get out of the range of punches. Should be noted that Weidman has a 7-inch reach advantage, and everyone's acting like it's a huge deal. I don't think it's that big a deal. I do question Kelvin's his ability to stay in a game plan, his determination, I don't know why I'm blanking on the word so hard. Do you have any idea what I'm trying to say, Wes? His mental fortitude, kind of, because he misses weight so often. I question that. And Chris Weidman, he's very good with sticking to game plans, very good at marching forward, has a lot of confidence, even though he's been finished 3 times in a row. And his size advantage could play a factor here. I think that Chris could fight at 205 pounds. Obviously, Gastelum lacks discipline, and he should be at 170 pounds. I know I'm going back and forth. I'm rambling a little bit, but overall, I've got to go with Kelvin Gastelum. I think he has the better gas tank. I think he's better at shifting in and out. He's better at changing angles. He could attack Weidman's body early. He loves roundhouse kicks to the body. He throws teeps to the body as well. And all of this, he has left hook to the body. And all of that is going to build and build. And Chris Weidman is going to slow down. And when he does, Gastelum, partially because he's moving up a weight class, his cardio, his gas tank, his ability to turn the volume up toward the end of fights, or other than in the Neil Magny fight, of course, is impeccable. And I think that's really what gets him the victory. Chris Weidman is going to fall off a cliff with his cardio about 9 minutes into the fight, and then at about minute 17 and a half, Gastelum's going to throw a double 1-2 combination and put him down, maybe finish with some ground and pound. But yeah, I've got Kelvin Gastelum via 4th round KO or TKO. So let's move on to the co-main event. We're both with – oh, wait. Wes, how fun is Weidman versus Mousasi going to be as the main event of a Bellator event?
I think it'll do fantastic views because of the controversy that we saw in the first fight. And there's definitely the potential that we could see it at some point, knowing that – I don't know how many more fights. Are you aware of Chris Weidman's contract?
No, I don't know about Chris Weidman's contract, but if you lose 4 in a row, it doesn't matter if you have 25 fights left on your contract. They could cut you.
For real. And, I mean, there's a good chance that they won't, just because of the name that he is, and I feel like he's still a pretty marketable guy. But then again, it's 4 fights in a row, like you mentioned. So, I mean, there's definitely a potential. I don't know how many fights he has left on his contract, and I feel like if it gets to that point, or let's say his contract is running out at some point soon, Bellator is going to be right there because they've been making some pretty good moves with signings.
Right, yeah. I'm just basically making a joke.
I mean, it's possible. You never know. I knew Mousasi was a free agent at the time, but I never thought he would have left the UFC for the how close he was to a title.
Do you think they cut him if he loses here?
I don't think so.
I think, yeah, it's so fucking crazy. He loses 4 in a row and he doesn't get cut. Do you think that they try to get him to go to 205 pounds? Because he does have a little bit of trouble making 185.
Yeah, I think there's a good potential. I mean, he's never missed weight before. I think it's going to be a determination factor on if he can make weight on Friday come that day. And if he does, maybe they'll keep him around even if he does lose. But it's kind of hard to say. I mean, his conditioning, though, I will say this, despite his cardio fall, or not his conditioning, but his physique looked in really great shape against Gegard Mousasi and Yoel Romero, quite improved from where he was back when he was beating Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida. So I'll give him that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just definitely think that Weidman loses, and I don't understand. They'll probably keep him. They'll probably keep him at middleweight, and I don't understand why they would do that. I know he knocked out the Spider. Maybe we see a rematch with the Spider, the trilogy. I would hate that because obviously the Spider's my boy. But anyway, I'm done talking about Chris Weidman. One more thing. Do you think Chris Weidman looks like Paul Rudd?
To be honest, I've thought about that actually once or twice before because I feel like I've seen somebody talk about it. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just, for the fun of it, Google search Paul Rudd, and there's a picture I found of him, and they look like brothers.
They do look like brothers, man. It's like, it's insane. And the more Weidman gets punched in the face, the more he looks like Paul Rudd. So maybe after Saturday night, he'll really look like Paul Rudd.
I sent you a picture, and nobody watching will see it, but I sent you a picture that you can see at some point. That's the picture I feel like looks the closest to him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Paul Rudd looks like Chris Weidman before Weidman got punched in the face. How about that?
That's undefeated 10-0, Chris Weidman.
Yeah, 10-0, right after knocking out Mark Munoz with an elbow. Dennis the Menace Bermudez, Darren the Damage Elkins. The odds have the Menace at -185, the comeback on Elkins at +160. I took a lot of notes on this fight, but I think I can just do it from memory. So what's funny to me here is that Elkins, he's known as a grinder. He's known as this wrestler. He takes down people. He doesn't have the most exciting fights except for in his last one. Obviously, he's coming in off of that crazy comeback of the century finish of Mirsad Bektic after getting mollywopped to the Netherlands in the first 2 rounds there. But Elkins does not have very good defensive wrestling. And Dennis Bermudez, he has solid defensive wrestling and really good offensive wrestling. If you were to look at which guy here is the more athletic guy, the more explosive guy, the more mobile person, the more dynamic with their striking ability, their ability to change from striking to grappling, all of those advantages, I think, are on Dennis Bermudez's side. The problem with Bermudez is his chin blows. He gets hurt often. He got hurt, I think, in the first 30 seconds against Jeremy Stephens. Of course, then he lost by flying knee later on. And obviously he got lengthy uppercut knocked out by the Korean Zombie in his last outing. I'm not certain that he's taken enough time off since then. It hasn't been a full year, which I like people to take a year off. You know, I've mentioned that already after getting knocked out. And on the flip side, Elkins showed that he has crazy heart, a crazy chin, a crazy amount of determination. He showed that in his last fight against Mirsad Bektic. So I'm almost leaning Darren Elkins just because he has the durability advantage, and it doesn't take much to knock out Dennis Bermudez. But then I ended up siding with the guy who's more explosive, more dynamic, is the better offensive and defensive wrestler, and that's Dennis Bermudez. I do that, though, with a caveat. If you're a gambling person, don't bet Dennis Bermudez. Don't parlay him or any of that stuff. If you wanted to bet on this fight, you should have got in on Elkins when he was +215. So I'm staying away from this one, but I'm definitely picking Dennis Bermudez probably via decision. There's no way he's going to finish the damage.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I was checking out Darren Elkins too, and I mean it's great. His last fight that he had with Mirsad Bektic, it was a fantastic comeback after pretty much losing the first 2 rounds. I think the first round might have even been a 10-8 in some people's eyes, maybe even myself. I don't remember too much, but he was able to get that comeback knockout. However, you have to think maybe Mirsad Bektic at that point, I felt like in that fight, he just tended to slow down quite a bit. I felt like he was just completely drained of cardio. He had worked really hard for a lot of those takedowns. But the biggest thing that you said was Darren Elkins' takedown defense. It's only 41% according to UFC Pick'em, and that's after all of his UFC fights. 41% is not that good, and I mean, he is a pretty decent, I think 34 of 91 takedowns in the UFC, but Dennis Bermudez, his takedown defense is at 92%. You mentioned it. He's great at avoiding those takedowns. Tatsuya Kawajiri was able to get him down once, but besides that, Dennis Bermudez was able to overwhelm him with the takedowns, along with the Hani Jason fight. Back when he fought Clay Guida, that was a big thing as well that he implemented very well. So I think that Darren Elkins, too, he's not really that successful with his punches. Dennis Bermudez lands quite a bit more in the fights. I do know that I agree with you about the chin situation. I feel like Bermudez's chin really isn't there, but Darren Elkins has taken quite a bit of hard shots there in his career as well. So this should be, I feel like, maybe a decent scrap, maybe some back and forth action depending on how Dennis Bermudez does with his top control. But overall, I don't think that Darren Elkins is going to be able to land any takedowns in the fight. I think that Dennis Bermudez will have the ability to maybe hold out just a little bit longer. I think in a 3-round fight, I'm going to favor Dennis Bermudez, and Elkins definitely could get a knockout, but then again, he's not really known for that knockout power. We saw Godofredo Pepe in that fight land quite a high volume amount of shots in the first round before getting taken down relentlessly, but I'm going to ultimately go the same route as you. I've got Dennis Bermudez picked by a unanimous decision. I think he'll take it 30-27 and 2 29-28.
I like it. One thing I forgot to mention is Bermudez actually hits super hard, but the reason I'm not picking him to get a finish is just because the damage is so fucking durable, so incredibly durable. But I wouldn't be surprised if – and Bermudez, he's got that kind of team alpha male thing where he'll double jab overhand right. and it's kind of predictable, but maybe he could land it and hurt the damage. But I just think his volume and defensive wrestling, offensive wrestling gets it done here. Patrick Durkin Cummins versus Gian Villante. The odds currently have Villante at -125. The comeback on Patrick Cummins at +105. But Patrick opened at -130, and in not much time at all, he's down to the underdog. And John opened up basically a pick'em. He went to even +100, and then after not too much time, he's up at +125. Wes, I know you love to get the extra points on fights, and Cummins versus Villante, it's a tight matchup on UFC Pick'em, and my girlfriend taught me this. It's kind of embarrassing, but she's pretty great. She told me that anytime that there's a tight matchup on UFC Pick'em, pick the thing to be a decision, and she did that once, and she got fucking 5 perfect on the card. I don't know if they were all tight matchups, decisions, but she had 5 perfect, and she told me every time it was a tight matchup, she picked it to go to a decision. And you know how she made her picks? She was picking who looked scarier. So who do you think looks scarier, Durkin or John? I'm kidding. Who's your pick?
To be honest, it's kind of hard seeing that Pat Cummins has the P stash just like old Timothy Johnson on UFC's fantasy. But man, this is a 50-50 fight, and I think Gian Villante has the striking abilities to definitely hurt and knock out Patrick Cummins, as we saw both Antonio Nogueira do and Glover Teixeira. But man, Jan Blachowicz had moments in their fight with Pat Cummins. In that first round, he went out there and hurt him, and then I don't remember what happened, but I remember he didn't have good IQ, and ended up Patrick Cummins was just able to do what he does, and that's grind, look for those takedowns and get them, and pretty much control when it gets on the mat. But I question Patrick Cummins' cardio as the fights go on. And one thing that I like about Gian Villante is that you mentioned it with Darren Elkins, his heart. We saw that in the Corey Anderson fight. Corey Anderson had a great start, was able to land a couple takedowns in there, and he was able to be the stronger starter. But Gian Villante held in there, landed a brutal knockout in that third round with like 30 seconds, a minute left. So it was a great comeback for him. I think that Gian Villante has the power in his hands to be able to get a knockout in this one. And it's just hard for me to pick Pat Cummins in fights just because it's so unpredictable. Just a couple little punches, if it's a jab or if it's just a little elbow in the clinch, I feel like he just gets rocked so easily. Even Fei Zhao had some moments in that fight. Oven St. Preux knocked him out in one round. Daniel Cormier did as well. I'm going to go Gian Villante. I think that he can get that knockout, but it's really risky knowing that he's been taken down here and there. But then again, his takedown defense is at 81%. If he can defend those takedowns, I think he's got a good shot. But because of Patrick Cummins' repetitiveness and looking for that clinch, sometimes it becomes predictable because he's shooting in from deep distances where he probably shouldn't. For that reason, I think Gian Villante can get the victory. So for those all combined, I actually picked him by a round 1 knockout. It's a little risky, but I do like his power, and I feel like he's got a good shot in this fight to be able to land that big power shot.
I'm going to be crazy here, Wes. First, Jeremy Brigham and Full-Time MMA in the comment section. They're both picking Villante via KO or TKO. Full-Time has it second round. Jeremy didn't say when he's going to pick it. Also, Daniel Maribian, sorry, man, mispronouncing his name. He says Villante's a rather unreliable fighter, but this is a great style for him. He does have pretty damn good takedown defense. He tends to fade. He throws a lot of single strikes, but Patrick, you mentioned it, Wes, he gets hurt by everything. And this is kind of a striker versus a grappler matchup. Durkin, I believe he showed us a little bit of improvement in his stand-up striking in his last fight, even though it was mostly a grinding affair. And Blachowicz has like -17% takedown defense, so that's, BF and D that Patrick was able to grind him out. But I don't think Durkin's going to be able to grind him out. But I also am not sure if Villante's going to be able to get the knockout here. I think he hurts him early. I think he hits him with some strikes that make Durkin do some goofy stuff that really registers high on the judges' scorecards. And kind of just because my girlfriend told me to, I'm going to pick John Villante via decision. I know that's not the most likely outcome, but I do like to pick decisions when it says tight matchup. I don't know if Villante hits hard, but he throws in a lot of single strikes. And even though Cummins was he got hit with Abbott, looked like he got fucking ace against Blachowicz, I think he might be able to tough it out here. And I'm going to pick Villante via decision. I know that's crazy. I know all of you guys are going to try to talk me out of it, but that's what I'm going with. Villante via decision. Moving down to quickly, Wes, is this next fight Jimmie El Terror Rivera versus Thomas Talminhas Almeida? Is that your prediction for fight of the night? Tell me it is.
Man, I was thinking about it, and I'm kind of going that way. But the one thing that I noticed that I feel may not make it a fight of the night is depending on Jimmie Rivera's game plan, knowing that Thomas Almeida is a very guns a-blazing kind of fighter, going out there swinging. I feel like Jimmie Rivera knows who he is and knows the capabilities he has going up against him. So maybe he tries to fight a little smarter in the fight, knowing that he's up there near the top. But that's a maybe. When you look at it on paper, this definitely has the potential. And probably out of all the fights, despite maybe the Burgos Pepe fight and maybe the main event, probably this is going to be the pick for fight of the night for most people. And also, I think it's the most likely outcome.
Right, yeah, I agree. It's my most look forward to fight on the entire card. Now, another question, Wes. Do you remember last week when Michael Bisping was kind of disrespecting Karen Bryant on the post-fight show about tucking your chin? Did you see that?
I did.
You know, he was saying, like, a fighter has to tuck his chin. He can't just have it up in the air, and he has to stay behind his shoulder. That's exactly what Jimmie Rivera does. Have you seen it?
I have, just from his fights and just what I've seen from pretty much the Pedro Munoz fight, Uriah Contra, and the Uriah Faber fight. That's exactly what he does. He fights right, nice and tight, but it pays off for him very well in his performances.
Yeah, and he also doesn't have a neck. Like his head is attached right to his traps. So like tucking that thing, and you know, like people have long necks tend to get knocked out more because their head snaps. Dude has no neck, and he tucks his. I don't know. So if Almeida were to win, right? The most likely outcome would probably be for him to knock Jimmie out. And Jimmie has never been finished with strikes. He only has one loss on his entire mixed martial arts career, and that was way back in November of 2008. And it was via split decision. Whoa, I just don't think that I don't think that Almeida is going to be able to knock him out. So now we can talk about who's going to win a decision. Jimmie Rivera, he likes to counter. He likes to throw his lead hook. And he's got this, he already mentioned, he's got this tight defense. He's really good at just getting out of range. When his opponent throws at him, he uses solid footwork. He stays behind his shoulder. He moves just out of range so they can't get to him. And even though Jimmie hasn't finished a fight in a little bit here, not since his UFC debut back in 2015 against Marcus Brimage, I do think he hits super hard. And the thing of it is, a lot of what he throws, they're hooking combinations. So he'll push to get a push. And then when he attacks, it's a left hook, right hook. It's a wide right because this is power hand. And he will then maybe take a left hook to the body. He likes to like ripping hook combinations. He does throw inside low kicks quite a bit. But he's a master of range. He's a master of countering, and his hands are super sharp. Almeida, he's got really good defense, but he holds his hands like right in front of him. And then he's willing to get in brawls like he did against Albert Morales. They get in close. They get in that phone booth. And then he completely disregards his defense, and he just kind of throws winging punches. And also, even at range, he's got his guard straight in front of him, and he's open to those hooks. And even in some of Almeida's most impressive performances, like against Brad One Punch Pickett or Anthony Burchak, Albert Morales, he reminds me of Frankenstein de Silva. Fights, he'll get hurt, and that seems to be what it takes for him to like, oh shit, I need to be super fucking violent now. And that's when he turns it on and basically kills his opponent. So I already mentioned Rivera seems to be unfazable, unhurtable, no neck, good defense, right? And then Almeida, really hurtable, especially really early often. And I just think that all of that stuff really favors Jimmie Rivera. And let me see how I officially picked him. I was debating if I was going to pick him via decision or stoppage. And so I kind of went in the middle, and I picked Jimmie Rivera via late stoppage. What do you think?
Man, I've honestly been back and forth on this one just because we mentioned it. It's a very competitive fight. Two fighters who like to go out there and throw down that both have very impressive striking abilities. I don't know if you actually knew this, but Jimmie Rivera actually competed on The Ultimate Fighter back when Bisping and Miller were there. And Jimmie Rivera actually got knocked out by a guy that we just critiqued for his knockout power, and that's Dennis Bermudez. Dennis Bermudez was able to knock him out in the second round. The cardio, I actually have seen that fight, and if I remember right, it's been a while, probably about 2 years since I've seen it, but I feel like what I remember is that Jimmie Rivera was definitely the stronger starter, was landing the better punches, but in that second round, you could visibly see after he looked for takedowns and tried to grind and land quite a bit of ground and pound on Dennis Bermudez, it wore him out. He got very fatigued in that fight, and Dennis Bermudez was actually able to come back and get a TKO just because Rivera had nothing left in the gas tank in that second round. But Jimmie Rivera, that was one of the things I noticed was his cardio seemed to fall, but that's back from 2011. His last victory in 2011 professionally was Jared Papazian, and that was in King of the Cage. So it's been 6 years, and he's been improving his game plan quite a bit. He's already got a victory over Brian Kelleher, who's fighting on this fight card. Has beat Alcantara, Pedro Munoz, Marcus Brimage, and Uriah Faber. And I can't take anything away from the cardio because in that third round against Uriah Faber, he was landing quite a bit of power shots too, and some of the biggest ones of the fight. So Thomas Almeida, though, is a very tough athlete. He has taken quite a bit of damage. We did see Cody Garbrandt knock him out, but Albert Morales, Anthony Burchak, Brad Pickett especially, they were able to land some pretty hard shots on him. But Thomas Almeida was able to fight through them, as you mentioned, kind of a slow starter, but was able to come in there and capitalize in the later parts of the fight. So maybe Thomas Almeida in that second and third round can pour it on, maybe get some kind of a finish. I'm not sure if he takes that first round, though. But I'm saying that because Cody Garbrandt was able to capitalize on the slow start of Almeida in the first fight, was able to knock him out in one round. And that was, I think, the first loss of Almeida's career. So it's a hard fight to call. Rivera, he's a decent wrestler. He's pretty good once he's able to get on top. But Almeida's got great defense. I feel like we're not going to see a lot of wrestling in this fight. I feel like it's going to be a stand-up battle, and going between two fighters who I guess haven't had a lot of losses on the record. I've got to go with the guy who has more victories by decision, just because I trust that a little more. And I did kind of hard on Jimmie Rivera because of those decisions or what happened in the fight with Dennis Bermudez, but he's got quite a bit of decision victories on his record for being such an athletic and powerful guy. But man, I don't want to make a pick, but I'm going to have to. So in the end, I'm going to go with Jimmie Rivera just because that was my initial pick. I feel like I trust his chin a little bit more despite having been knocked down on tough. But I do like his tight kind of boxing. I feel like he's pretty smart with his defensive abilities, even though their defensive striking is pretty similar percentage-wise. But I don't know if I trust Thomas Almeida in this one. I feel like it comes down to that too. Who can you trust more to not get knocked out? And I feel like Thomas Almeida, after seeing him get wobbled in pretty much all of his UFC fights, that's a little bit risky despite only having that one loss on his record. So I'm going to go Jimmie Rivera. I had him picked by decision, and you know what? I'm just going to keep it because that was my initial pick.
Yeah, that's probably the most likely outcome. And I totally forgot about that season of The Ultimate Fighter, or where he got finished by Bermudez. One, because I don't watch The Ultimate Fighter, but two, thanks a lot for correcting me on that, Wes. I appreciate that. But one more thing is Rivera hasn't fought in a while, but I think that's because he had a scheduled fight with Brian Caraway, and then Caraway pulled out because of injury or something. But in an interview with James Lynch, Rivera said that he thinks Caraway pulled out just because he didn't want to fight him. Caraway wanted to fight John Lineker. And then in the same interview with Lynch, Rivera said that some of his buddies saw Caraway at the fighter retreat, and he was doing dances and stuff, so his injury must not have been that bad. And maybe I trust Rivera, but so he's just been waiting. He refused to face somebody that wouldn't get him closer to a title shot. So that's just some kind of outside the cage information. Let's move on to Lyman good, versus Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos, Capoeira. The odds have Lyman Good as the favorite. Where the hell is it at? Minus 220. The comeback on Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos at plus 180. Fun fact, Lyman Good, he trains with Tiger Schulman, so he's a teammate of Jimmie Rivera. I wonder if his team would just stay out there. Now they'll probably walk to the back and then come out again. But anyway, who are you picking? You thinking Tiger Schulman gets 2 victories in a row here?
Man, it's a hard one to pick, and I think the biggest reason is because Lyman Good is actually coming off a 2-year layoff, having not competed since knocking out Andrew Craig in his debut, which was definitely, a fantastic knockout in the second round. But that was, again, July 15th of 2015, and he had been pretty active for a couple fights before that. But then again, he only fought once in 2013, so we haven't seen a lot of activity from him. I haven't had a chance to watch a lot of footage on Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos, but I do remember kind of checking him out that he, in his last fight, ended up fighting, I think it was Kita Nakamura. It was the last? Yeah, Kita Nakamura. And the fight before that, he fought Omari Akhmedov. And in both of those fights, first off, I'll say Kita Nakamura, I didn't think he won. I thought that the fight was pretty close, but I did not score it for him. I did score it for Kita Nakamura. It was a fight of the night performance. We saw quite a bit of strikes being thrown in that one. But Kita Nakamura seemed to be the predominant wrestler, and that's the biggest hole in Dos Santos' game. He only has a 39% takedown defense. Nicholas Dalby, who I don't even think is in the UFC anymore, he lost quite a bit of fights, was able to capitalize on that wrestling. Omari Akhmedov did the same thing, but he was able to come back and get a third-round knockout in that one. Another case of heart. We see Zaleski Dos Santos with quite a bit of power in his hands, and he's able to capitalize on that and win rounds. But I question his takedown abilities. And Lyman Good, he's a pretty well-rounded athlete. He's got quite a bit of different victories on his resume, predominantly by knockout, but he's got a couple submissions in there, and the submissions came before he was in the UFC, right beforehand in 2015. But his losses are to some of the best in Bellator. He was a Bellator fighter for a while. I think that's how most people know him. He was actually the Bellator welterweight.
I like it.
Welterweight. That's what I should call it for welterweight. The welterweight champion at one point, but he ended up losing it to Ben Askren, who then never lost it after that fight. So Lyman Good was one of the very first Bellator welterweight champions. So he lost to Ben Askren, Rick Hahn, and Andrei Koreshkov. Rick Hahn, I think he's not in Bellator at the moment. Maybe he is. I may be completely crazy. I checked it just to make sure. He's in Titan FC now and possibly retired. He hasn't fought in a while. But then Andrei Koreshkov and Ben Askren, still two of the best welterweights in the world up to date. So his losses aren't that bad. I'm checking them out too because I can't really remember what the scorecards were. But, the fight with Koreshkov, it was 3 rounds, but he was able to win a round on the scorecards. And back with Ben Askren, I was going to see if I could check it out real quick to see how he did on the scorecards. I didn't watch it whenever it happened. I wasn't really in the UFC. But we had one scorecard was 50-45, but then we had another 48-47. So maybe he won 2 rounds in that one against Ben Askren, one of the best welterweights in the world. I don't know. I'm going to go Lyman Good. I like his abilities in this one. It's a little bit risky, though, having taken such a big layoff. But I do think Lyman Good gets it done. And I picked him by a second-round knockout, but I think a decision is probably the most likely outcome.
The guys in the comment section, Jeremy Brigham and Daniel, tell me how to write your name phonetically. Marabian, Daniel Marabian. Anyway, they're putting bets on Zaleski Dos Santos because he's been the more active fighter. And honestly, I'm picking Zaleski Dos Santos. I'm not a guy that's going to give out betting tips. I don't want you to bet on what I said I would bet on, but I too like Zaleski Dos Santos at plus money. Plus, he's currently on 5 dimes, plus 180, and I like him at that. Not only has he been the more active fighter in terms of how many fights he's had lately, Lyman Good's been out for 2 years, but he's also the more active fighter in the octagon. Sure, Good knocked out Andrew Craig with a counter uppercut, which was pretty damn neat. But in that fight, he he didn't do much of anything. He threw a lot of single strikes at a time, a jab sometimes. He threw just a single jab in the first round, just a jab, move, single jab, move his shoulders, jab. No, just jab, not even double jab. And I don't like that. Zaleski, he doesn't hit as hard as Good. Sure, Good only throws the one strike, but one of those strikes could put you to sleep, of course. And he does a pretty good job of pushing his opponents to the cage and then working them with dirty boxing a la Randy Couture and shit like that. But I just like the output and the diversity with which Zaleski dos Santos throws at his opponents. You mentioned his fight with Kita Nakamura. Kita is a ground guy. And then his fight before that was where he knocked out Omari Akhmedov. And Akhmedov, sure, he throws a lot of big looping strikes, but he likes to take you down as well. Nicholas Dalby, that was a fun fight. He even tried to wrestle Zaleski a little bit. And I don't think Lyman Good is going to try to wrestle him. He might try to push him up against the fence and Randy Couture him there. But if the fight happens at range, like I think it will, I think the volume really favors Dos Santos. And then in the later rounds, I watched some of Lyman Good's Bellator stuff. He seemed to get tired. And sure, he's coming off this layoff because of a tainted supplement. But what if it wasn't a tainted supplement, man? I don't know if his physique's going to look as good. I saw some pictures of him, and he's still just shredded as fuck. But what if he was taking something that might help him in the later rounds? I have to believe that Zaleski dos Santos will have more volume, and he will be the fresher fighter after the 10th minute of the fight. And for that reason, the volume, the cardio, I'm picking dos Santos probably via decision. If somebody's going to get a finish, though, it's more than likely going to be Lyman Good. But and that's probably the most likely outcome, perhaps a decision for Lyman Good. But I'm going to roll with Dos Santos. I like him at underdog money, and I like it. You know, on UFC Pick'em, sometimes you just got to pick an underdog, and that's what I'm doing here with Dos Santos. So favoring the volume and the output there. Rafael Sapo Natal versus Eryk Anders, ya boy. Rafael Natal, his nickname is Sapo. I think it means frog in Portuguese. My buddy Rodrigo Rojas will let me know here. The odds have Anders, or Anders perhaps, who's making his UFC debut, minus 125. The comeback on Sapo Natal at plus 105. I know that you're high on Anders, so I'll let you go ahead and take this one first. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty high on him. I think the first fight I had a chance to watch him live was the Bellator 162 card, and I went back and watched some of his tapes before that one. And this was only in October of last year, but I went back because I had recognized the name, and it's because he actually played football at Alabama. And I remember back in the 2009 Rose Bowl, they were playing Texas, and he made the pretty much the most important play of the game, was able to get a sack and prevent Texas from taking it down and scoring because the score was pretty close. So I thought that was cool. Eryk Anders, but he's a very good athlete. One thing that I've noticed is that he's still undefeated, one of the bigger things, but he's got a lot of power in his hands. He's got quite a bit of knockouts in the first round. We saw his last fight, which came against Brandon Allen. The biggest problem that I've seen with Eryk Anders is that his cardio falls tremendously as the fight goes on. Those last two rounds, Brendan Allen was able to take over. But Allen's a very tough athlete, and Anders was able to dominate those first couple rounds with his aggressiveness, his very, very powerful hands, and his wrestling abilities. His wrestling is one thing that gets him very far in fights. And I've kind of questioned picking Rafael Natal recently. And it's just because I feel like he's not really the same fighter that he used to be. He's seemed to have fallen off quite a little bit. His last fight, he did get knocked out there in the first round by Tim Boetsch. And he's actually, I think, been knocked out like, I don't know how many times in his career, but maybe like 5 or 6 times. So a lot of the times he's going up against heavy hitters, heavy strikers, he tends to get knocked out. And Eryk Anders is one of those who I think has the abilities to possibly get a victory in this one. Anders had quite a bit of amateur fights, and he had quite a bit of professional fights. Now he's the LFA middleweight champion, at least the first one, the inaugural one. So in the end, I'm actually going to be picking Eryk Anders. I like his abilities. Rafael Natal, I'm not really sure where he's at in his mixed martial arts game. I think that if this fight, though, does get past maybe that first and second round, Rafael Natal is going to be able to take the third. but I'm going to be taking Eryk Anders. People may disagree, but I'm going a first-round knockout. I may be a little bit high on him, but Rafael Natal, I question that chin, and I question his ability to defeat strikers. The only one that he's been able to get over one was Rye Hall. That was pretty lackluster of a fight in all, but I'm going to end it there. I don't want to ramble too much. I think I've rambled too much anyways, but I'm going to go Eryk Anders and by first-round stoppage.
I didn't think you were rambling. It was all of that was good points, Wes. One thing I want to point out at the start of what I want to say is a couple of fights back, or maybe it was a few fights back. It was back in 2014. But anyway, Rafael Natal, he's an orthodox fighter, and he's facing a southpaw here in Eryk Anders. And when that happens, he likes to throw his right straight first, and then he'll throw his jab second, and then he'll angle off. And if he doesn't throw the straight and then the jab and then angle off, he's going to be looking to get a clinch, get you up against the fence. So he did that against Chris Camozzi, and Camozzi was beating this guy in a clinch game, in a clinch battle, a battle for dominant position against the fence. And Chris Camozzi is not a person you should be losing to in grappling exchanges of any kind. So I question that. Next thing is Eryk Anders is a large man. He was a middle linebacker at Alabama? He was a linebacker, right?
Linebacker, yep.
So some kind of linebacker. And he also used to fight at 205 pounds. He's a physically imposing specimen, and he hits super hard. He has a very good straight left. He's good at getting takedowns. He's good at smothering his opponents, getting him on the ground, and then getting with some ground and pound. And I question if Rafael Natal isn't this guy that's going to super volume strike you. You've been looking at the strikes landed per minute lately. It's only 3. That's not crazy out there. He's going to be throwing a lot of 2-1s or maybe 2-3s, maybe a 3-2 perhaps, but he's not going to overwhelm anybody with his volume. And he's not like this super powerful puncher where he could keep Eryk Anders at the end of his range to keep him off of him. I think Anders comes out guns a fucking blazing, really puts it on Rafael, maybe gets him to the ground, definitely wins the clinch exchanges. I think that's a for certain. And I think that Anders either gets an early stoppage or perhaps maybe a decision. Like you said, Rafael could win the 3rd round because of some late gassing by Eryk Anders. But I think Eryk definitely shows up good in his UFC debut. It should be noted he's taking the fight on just 2 weeks short notice, so that could really play into the hands of what you said with his cardio, Wes. He's replacing Elizeu Di Chirico, some shit like that. So his cardio is probably not great, but it might not get past the early on in this fight. I'm going to pick Eryk Anders officially via early 2nd round KO or TKO, and that's what I'm going to put on my UFC pick'em. Moving down to Ryan LaFlare versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. The odds have LaFlare at -190, the comeback on the Brazilian Cowboy at +165. Wes, I mentioned before the show started. Before the odds came out, I thought in my head, before I did film study and everything, I think that Oliveira is going to be the underdog. So the odds came out and Oliveira was at +135. I saw the line was moving a little bit toward him being less of a, like initially it was moving toward he was being less of a favorite. So he opened at +160, then dropped to 135. So I got him at peak shitty odds. But anyway, I was like, man, I better jump on him before he turns into the favorite. And then I did my film study, and it's like, Brian, you stupid, stupid man. Ryan LaFlare is going to get this victory. So I'm picking Ryan LaFlare. The reasons being, I originally thought that Oliveira would be able to hang with him in the grappling department because Oliveira, even though he's billed on the broadcast as being this kickboxer, most of his victories are he likes to get people up against the fence, knee him to the body, really bully them with his size advantage, and not too much of the lengthy striking. He even tried to take down Cowboy took him down. But anyway, so that's to my next point. LaFlare, amazing wrestler, absolutely amazing wrestler. He's really good with feints from his striking. He'll feint level change that opens up his striking. He's also way more diverse in his striking than I originally thought he would be. He has a lot of long kicks, to the body. His hands are a lot sharper than I thought they would be. His footwork is good. And I know I said it already, but his feints, I really love him. And I just don't think Oliveira is going to be able to hang with LaFlare once he decides to open up with his wrestling. I think the initial part of this fight is going to happen on the feet. LaFlare is going to be surprisingly good there. maybe Oliveira tries to initiate the clinch, and that's going to be bad news bears because I think LaFlare dominates him in every grappling realm, standing on the ground, whatever it is. And I think I'm going to lose a bet here. I should not have bet on Alex Oliveira. And I think Ryan LaFlare wins a clear decision. But you think my bet might win, huh?
Man, I'm kind of denying myself now. Just you kind of taught me out of wanting to pick Alex Oliveira, but I'm going to stick with him just because of a couple different reasons. The biggest thing that I've noticed with Ryan LaFlare, he only has, I think, one loss on his record, and that was to Damian Maia. But in the fights that he's been facing people who like to grapple as well, such as the João Ron Canero fight and also the John Howard fight, they were able to hurt Ryan LaFlare with punches in the fights. Santiago Ponzinibbio had a couple of moments back when they fought, but Ryan LaFlare consistent with those takedowns. And but he seems to get hit quite a bit. And the only loss that he had was to Damian Maia, who's not known at all for his striking abilities, who was able to capitalize with a lot of wrestling and submission threats. But that was pretty much it. Ryan LaFlare never was really any danger of getting knocked out in that fight. And Ryan LaFlare has pretty impressive submission defensive abilities, as we saw it in that fight as well with Damian Maia. But Alex Oliveira, he's kind of known for being that kind of like a grinding kind of fighter, but also pretty underrated with his striking abilities. He's has some credentials in Muay Thai. He's pretty crafty when he looks in those clinch positions. He likes to throw in knees, a couple good elbows in there as well. And this could be a pretty back and forth fight, I feel like, and that's because Alex Oliveira and Ryan LaFlare are two guys that, first off, like to throw on the feet. Ryan LaFlare, you mentioned it. I feel like I'm copy and pasting like Kenny Florian, but he's pretty crafty with those with his striking abilities. He's pretty low key, pretty good with landing punches in there. I like his movement. He's pretty light on the feet. He's got some pretty good upper body movement and torso rotation, and I like that about Ryan LaFlare. But as I mentioned, he gets hit quite a decent amount. Alex Oliveira too, but he's got a pretty decent chin. And what I was saying before is that they both like to look for takedowns. Ron LaFlare, 65% success or takedown defense. Alex Oliveira, 59%. But they both like to look for those takedowns. Ron LaFlare a little bit more successful than Alex Oliveira, who's more successful with his striking. So it could be back and forth. I'm thinking Alex Oliveira might be able to become the first man to stop Ron LaFlare, because I really question what's going to happen in those clinch positions. Alex Oliveira is pretty good at controlling in those different positions up against the cage, but Ron LaFlare might be a little bit smarter to avoid that. But I actually picked Alex Oliveira. I've got him picked by a decision. I really like his game. I think that he's got abilities that he could win the fight, but he's got to fight smart, knowing that he's going up against a guy who sometimes fights one-dimensionally, but has shown impressive strikes in the past. But I definitely do question Ryan LaFlare's chin. We've seen it rocked a couple times, and I wonder if that's going to catch up to him at some point in his career.
Yeah, perhaps. I forgot to mention a couple of key components to why I switched my pick from making that bet to going over to LaFlare. So LaFlare's only loss, Damian fucking Maia. I mean, everybody gets out grappled by Damian Maia. Second thing is, so I was mentioning that Natal got out clinched against the fence by Brian Camozzi. Well, Alex Oliveira, it was brief, but it was enough for me to be like, what the hell? Why'd I pick that guy? Alex Oliveira briefly got out clinch grappled against the fence to James Moonwalker Muntasiri, who's a guy who, if we were playing a video game and he had wrestling stats or grappling stats, it'd be almost non-existent. So like, geez Louise, Oliveira, why are you getting out clinched by James Muntasiri? So that right there was like, and it was a while back, don't get me wrong. But still, I was like, shit. Made the wrong pick. I'm losing the bet here. Moving on. Damian, the Polish Pitbull, Grabowski versus Chase, the Vanilla Gorilla Sherman. So the odds have Grabowski as a plus 205 underdog and Sherman minus 245. My biggest question here is, does Grabowski make it past one half of 1 round, because in his total UFC career, 2 fights, he has lasted 2 minutes and 31 seconds. So just in 2 fights, he's gone just over half of a total round of experience. That's not too good, right? And his last fight, Anthony Freight Train Hamilton finished him in 14 seconds. So how are you picking Sherman to win, really?
Man, I don't know how you can pick a guy that's lost 2 fights in a row by knockout. One of the biggest things about Grabowski that I've noticed is that he's, even in his fights before he fought in the UFC, he has no activity on the feet whatsoever. He does not throw a lot of punches, is not active at all with trying to land anything. And all he pretty much does is he waits for opponents to come in and clinch with him, and then he looks for trips and then takes you down and tries to find submissions. That's pretty much all he does. Chase Sherman's not going to be the guy that's trying to get up there and trying to clinch. The biggest thing, and there was a fight with Damian Grabowski, I noticed that his opponent kept looking for the clinch, and I'm trying to remember who it was. I'm looking it up real quick. It was Kenny Garner. Kenny Garner back in M1 kept looking for the clinch and was winning some of the exchanges. Grabowski landing absolutely hardly any punches in the fight, but he was able to trip him a couple times and then get a 3rd-round submission in that fight. And, man, I can't pick Grabowski. He just doesn't have a lot of activity. He's been knocked out twice in a row, where he only landed 1 punch against Anthony Hamilton and 1 even against Derek Lewis. He's got 5 knockout wins, but 2 of them actually came by his opponent being injured. So really 3 in reality, and they've been years and years ago, nothing recent. Chase Sherman, he's definitely hittable, but Grabowski doesn't have a lot of activity, so I don't think he's going to get hit a whole lot in this fight. And we saw Rashad Coulter have those two have a wild fight in their last exchange. It concerns me in picking Sherman because he does lack a lot of head movement, but he's got great rips to the body. He's very technical with what he tries to put together and land against his opponents, and I like that a lot about Chase Sherman. I think he's a pretty exciting fighter to watch, and that goes along with his durability. So I'm going to be picking a 1st-round knockout for Chase Sherman over Damian Grabowski. I think that it does maybe happen under the first half of the 1st round. I'm going to guess maybe around that 1 minute and 45-second mark.
I don't know. So part of me is like, yeah, obviously Grabowski can't make it past an early 1st round. But then the other part of me is I don't think that Chase Sherman is really, really a devastating striker, a devastating finisher. But I probably, too, will go with Chase Sherman via 1st round, and if not, I might pick him via 2nd round just to be different than US, so I can catch up with you on points for UFC Pick'em. But, yeah, Grabowski, not only does he throw few strikes, but when he does throw strikes, he tends to throw an overhand right, and he really ducks his head in. And that's how Anthony Hamilton countered him with an uppercut when he ducked in on a strike. That's how he finished him. And that's not good. And in typical heavyweight fashion, I watched some of his regional stuff. I watched him in M1. It's like a 10-sided ring with, the net on the bottom. I think it's 10-sided, whatever. Say it, Wes. What's up?
I was just saying that apparently I checked out Chase Sherman. I didn't know this, but he got knocked out back in 2014 by Alex the Spartan Nicholson, and then I put Cy in parentheses in bold.
Yeah, that's not good. But I mean, Nicholson, if he's going up to heavyweight, he does throw a lot of spinning shit. He's very movable, a lot more movable than or mobile than a heavyweight. So that's not really surprising. But Chase Sherman, for a heavyweight, if he's facing other heavyweights, other guys his own size, he's really mobile. He's a former collegiate football player. He has really good footwork. Not really good footwork, but he moves decently. He's got some good kicks to the body. He has throws in combination with his strikes. Super durable, as we saw in his the fight against Ledette. He didn't look very durable against Walt Harris, but he did look pretty damn durable against Justin Ledette. And I don't think with the single strikes, with the sloppy-ass takedown attempts that Grabowski is going to be throwing at Sherman, that Grabowski is going to be able to do much. And I was saying Grabowski, he has a terrible gas tank. In M1, he would gas out quickly, even in his victories. And I think the movement, the volume, the durability of Chase Sherman is going to get it done here. And maybe it could be a 2nd-round knockout, because that's all it's really going to take for Grabowski to gas out. But, yeah, confident pick in Chase Sherman. But the odds what did I say they were? Where did it go? Minus 245. I'm not confident in laying that on any heavyweight. Perhaps parlay him for funsies, but in no way would I bet on Chase Sherman. Let's move down to the next fight on the card, which is the last one on the UFC Fight Pass prelims, which is Kyle Crash Bochniak versus Jeremy JBC Kennedy. The first thing I want to say about Kyle Bochniak is that he's one of the guys like Holly Holm who barks or yells or whatever when he strikes, and I hate it. It's so fucking annoying. And the worst part for him is that Caitlin Chukagian, I hate all of them. Why are you doing that? It's a huge tell because Kyle Bochniak, he throws quite a bit of feints, but he won't, I'm going to call it bark. He won't bark when he's feinting. So go ahead, throw all the feints you want. If you're not barking, I know you're not going to throw at me. And then when he does throw, then he'll bark. What the fuck? On the regional scene, a lot of what he did was he would come in with a straight right and then get in on a takedown, or he'd counter his opponent's forward pressure to take them to the ground. He has decent ground control, decent grappling. He moves, at least in his last couple of fights in the UFC, he moves side to side for no apparent reason, just to use his gas tank, I guess. And Jeremy Kennedy, he's not a guy who I believe should ever be minus 245. The comeback on Bochniak is plus 205. I don't trust that. I think that both of these guys are a little bit overhyped. I think that definitely the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger is a little bit overhyped. But Bochniak isn't great defensively with his wrestling. Kennedy, he's going to be pressing forward. He's probably going to have the more volume. He's not going to bite on the stupid feints of Bochniak. Kennedy has the better wrestling. And I don't think this fight's going to be that exciting, honestly, Wes. So I don't care that much. But I think Junior Bacon Cheeseburger snags a decision.
I really like that new nickname. Is
that's
that his actual
nickname?
nickname?
Yeah, that's what JBC means.
That's pretty awesome. I feel like I should have known that, but oh well, that's pretty awesome. I'm agreeing with you on this one. Jeremy Kennedy, he's undefeated at 10-0. He's pretty relentless with looking for takedowns. He's been very successful with them. He's actually landed 13 in only 2 of his UFC fights, and he's got 100% takedown defense. I don't think he's ever been taken down in his career. But then most of them came over fighters that were fatigued, and we saw that in the fight with Hani Jason. He was able to land a lot of those takedowns in that third round. He's got a great work in the clinch, great control, loves to press it up there, and be very powerful in those exchanges. And but sometimes he leaves his body susceptible to knees. And I noticed that when he fought, I think it was Alessandro Ricci, who was another Canadian. I think he was the guy that got knocked out by Paul Felder. And he gets kneed quite a bit in the body. And that's one thing a little concerning, but it's hard to pick for me, Kyle Bochniak. I like the guy, but I thought he should have lost to Enrique Barzola, but they did score it in Bochniak's favor. The grunt thing, he does quite a bit too. I feel like that leads to a little bit of predictability in what he's about to throw. The biggest thing that he throws in this fights, and I guarantee you we're going to see it in the fight up here against JBC, is that outside leg kick with the right. That's one thing he throws over and over, and you can see it coming from quite a long ways. JBC, I feel like, can kind of predict it and then be able to defend a lot of it. And Bochniak doesn't have a lot of volume. He kind of throws in one little shot. He's got a really powerful right hand, but that's about it. And then he's got that powerful right kick, but that's about it. He doesn't throw anything else behind it usually, unless he's putting together an aggressive combination by pushing forward. And he also struggles with top control. And I don't think that we're going to see him on top in this fight up against a pretty impressive wrestler in Jeremy Kennedy. So I've got Jeremy Kennedy by a unanimous decision. I think he will take all 3 rounds by 30-27. Maybe a 30-26 in there too.
Whoa. You think he's going to get a 10-8 round?
I just don't see Bochniak having – I don't know what the rules are, if they're in effect or not, but Bochniak, I've noticed that he just doesn't have a lot of activity. He did when he fought Charles Rosa, but Rosa's a pretty active guy. His last fight, he showed no activity at all. Besides the kicks, that was pretty much it. He got taken down quite a bit. I think he only landed about 20 punches. So 20 punches in a 3-round fight, that's not a whole lot.
Man, if that happens, I'm going to give you so many props, Wes. That is, Eric Stevens says you're really on to something there. So I hope you are. So you're really confident in Jeremy Kennedy. I forgot to mention the dude's extremely durable. He ate a double flying knee from Honey Jason. He ate a bunch of huge strikes from Honey Jason in the early rounds there, or in the very first round. So very, very durable guy, young guy. All of the guys that I guess the MMA sucker guys in the chat are.
Well, what I was thinking is that just from being a part of, I write for MMA Sucker.
Oh, because he's Canadian, right?
A lot of my guys are friends and know JBC, especially Jeremy Brand. Give him a follow on Twitter. He's a great guy. Jeremy's talked to me about JBC, and he thinks he's the real deal. He was, I think, supposed to fight Andre Fili, and he was going to pick him over Andre Fili. And I kind of watched him tape, and I started to be like, hey, I like this guy. I think he's got some potential with his wrestling abilities. Just needs to work a little bit with his striking.
I am always very, very skeptical on, no offense to the Canadian guys, they're my friends as well, but I'm skeptical on when they're super hyped on a guy. I think that it's kind of like if there were a guy from Nebraska that were going to the UFC, I'd be like, this guy's the shit, this guy's the best. And then they hang out with them. You know, they know them in real life. They know their personality, so that they're a little bit biased when it comes to these guys. But I do think Kennedy will get the victory. I want to ask you, -240. I know you're not a bettor, Wes, but you sound super confident in Jeremy Kennedy. -245. Would you play him straight? Would you put him in a parlay? What do you think there?
Man, I wish I bet a little more because I'm pretty confident in him. I think a parlay would probably be a really good call. I'm pretty confident in a Jeremy Kennedy victory. But then again, it's a little bit risky, and I'm going to check real quick. I'm going to check quick while I'm talking, but Kyle Bochniak is from – let's see. I feel like he's from Boston, but I'm not 100% sure. No, okay, he's from Massachusetts. Sure, right. Well, I was thinking Long Island, there's some people on the card who are probably going to know him, know who he is. And being in Long Island, I feel like that's going to be something that maybe there's going to be people around him. So I feel like there could be some people cheering him on. It's kind of near his hometown, JBC coming into the United States. I think this is only his second fight in the U.S., so maybe a little bit risky, but I'm honestly pretty confident in Jeremy Kennedy getting a victory here.
A lot of people in the chat here, I'm sorry, the chat's moving a lot faster than it normally does, so I have to thank all of you guys for hanging out. Liam Hughes, Dave LB, Daniel Morabian, Matthew Hodge. They all think that Jeremy's going to be low-owned on DraftKings, but, man, Jeremy, he's got to be like the most expensive fighter on DraftKings. And he is the most expensive fighter on DraftKings, so I don't think I would play him. But, I mean, if he gets a lot of takedowns, he could score a lot of points.
I don't think I'd put him on your DraftKings team just because I think the people that get the finishes are the ones that get the more points. I'm not really sure how the points work, but
if he were to get a lot of takedowns early and then a third-round finish, he could score fucking shitloads.
I think it'd be a good call because I'm pretty confident in him getting a victory. But if he's the most expensive, I'd kind of explore your options that are a little bit cheaper so you can kind of have a dynamic balance with who you're picking.
Sorry, Brian Kelleher is $100 more than him. But still, 9,100 on DraftKings. That's a shitload.
That is quite a bit. I think the highest you can go is close to the 9,500, I think. Maybe a little more, but maybe it's a risk. I think it would be a good one to take.
I don't know. I haven't made a DraftKings team yet, but maybe he'd be low owned just because he's 9,100. He's the second most expensive guy on the card. It goes Brian Kelleher at 92, Jeremy Kennedy 91, Timothy Johnson 9,000. So anyway, we're both picking Junior Bacon Cheeseburger. Let's move down to the most expensive guy on the fight card, Brian Boom Kelleher versus Marlon Chito Vera. The odds have Kelleher -235. He opened at -190, quickly went up to -230, leveled off for a bit. Now he's -235. Marlon Vera +195. So honestly, Wes, there's not a ton of film on Kelleher. I had to watch like highlight videos to get some of his stuff about him. Obviously, he had that fantastic UFC debut against Yuri Alcantara with the quick tap in the first round, followed by one hell of a rant, talking some shit to the Brazilian fans in Brazil, mind you. But I'm still pretty hyped on Brian Kelleher. You think he beats Marlon Vera?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. It's nothing against Cheeto Vera. I like the guy. I've been very impressed with his what he's been able to put together at such a young age. I think he's only like 24, 25 years old. But one thing I've noticed with Cheeto Vera is that he's very repetitive in his striking attack. One of the bigger things is those kicks. The kicks kind of don't have a lot of whole pop behind them, but he was able to show that repetitiveness against Brad Pickett. And he was able to catch him in that third round. But besides that, he didn't really show any moments of being the victorious fighter. But he was able to get that knockout. And another thing that I'm actually picking Brian Kelleher again. I'm picking him because Cheeto Vera, he fights a lot circling the outside and doesn't initiate a lot of takedowns. I've noticed that with Brian Kelleher. He's a pretty aggressive fighter, likes to try to get up there in your face. And if he can pull off takedowns, he's pretty good once he gets on top. But he says on his UFC fantasy or his UFC's page that his favorite grappling technique is that guillotine choke, which he was able to submit the BJJ black belt Yuri Alcantara with. And it only took 2 seconds to force the tap. And I can't remember who he's training with, but whoever it is said that he's got one of the tightest squeezes in the game once he's able to pull and latch onto that guillotine choke. So maybe he can get it against Cheeto Vera, but I don't know if Cheeto Vera is going to be the one initiating the takedowns. I think he's going to be looking for those kicks like he usually does. And Brian Kelleher, maybe if he can get him down to the ground, get some kind of stoppage, but I'm actually going to be picking a decision. It's crazy to me. He's the favorite and the most expensive, or the underdog, or he is the favorite, but the most expensive on DraftKings, yet he's only being picked 28% of people on UFC Pick'em. So that's one thing that I feel like could help us if you agree with me in picking Brian Kelleher.
He's only fucking 28% on UFC Pick'em are picking Brian Kelleher?
72% are picking Marlon Vera, and 28 are picking Brian Kelleher.
Holy, that's got to change, right? I mean, do you think that a lot of people just wait till the last minute to make their picks? And then before I started really paying attention and doing film study and stuff, Wes, I've played UFC Pick'em for a long time. I have a different username now than I used to. But anyway, so I might wait until like the day of the fights and just go through and pick all the favorites and then maybe like one underdog here and there. So certainly more people are going to pick Brian Kelleher. Right?
I mean, I think that's the better pick. I feel like why some people are picking Cheeto Vera, but maybe it's because more people recognized him knocking out Brad Pickett than Brian Kelleher submitting Yuri Alcantara, which is kind of weird because I feel like more would have seen Kelleher. That was on the prelims of a pay-per-view, right? I don't know.
Brian Kelleher, when he beat Alcantara, you think that not many people have...
I feel like people maybe have just jumped on it yet. I feel like maybe they should have. I think that Brian Kelleher fight happened in Yuri Alcantara's home, like background. So maybe, I don't know.
It was the first fight of the FS1 prelims at UFC 212 where Holloway beat Jose Aldo. I mean, that should have been a decently watched fight.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And I felt like more people would have picked early, but, I'm not too sure on that one. It's kind of weird to me.
Yeah, anyway, so you were talking about the kicks from Vera. They do have some pop on them, but the thing of it is, just like all other guys that like to kick, if you take their spacing away, they can't even get the kicks off. So there's a problem there. He doesn't have enough pop in his hands to keep Brian Kelleher at bay, and Kelleher is going to come marching forward with looping hooks, and he does have a lot of power in his hands. I'm going to get with a bold prediction, not bold in who I think is going to win, Wes, but I think that Kelleher comes out. He pushes Vera close to the fence. He wings some hooks at him. He hurts Vera. Vera tries for a takedown, and Kelleher locks in that guillotine choke like he did against Yuri Alcantara. So I'm picking Brian Boom Kelleher via guillotine choke at 4 minutes and 23 seconds. I'm kidding. I'm not being that specific. But a first-round submission for Brian Boom Kelleher. And that I lost my place. So we're moving on to the next fight, which is Timothy Johnson versus Junior Albini Baby. So I tweeted probably yesterday, a couple of days ago. I don't know. My memory isn't that great. But Albini, I don't know why the hell he's here. I know that the UFC heavyweight division is pretty shallow, and he's a young guy with He's 13-2, lots of finishes on his record. I think he's on like a 7-fight win streak or something like that. He hasn't lost since 2012. But then you look at his opponents, and a couple of fight films that I was able to find from Junior Albini, he was facing guys that were way smaller than him. Maybe he's huge. I don't know exactly, but his opponents looked a lot smaller than him. 2 fights ago, his victory was over a guy who was 2-7. That's terrible. His last victory was over a guy who's like 19-13, which there's a lot of dudes in main events of local promotions that have records like that. You know, they're basically 500. And most of his victories are via submission. He has quick hands and good movement. And then he'll use his quick hands, get in close, get a body lock, and then a trip takedown. And then he's good from the top position with ground and pound. And he also, if he's taken down like Timothy Johnson's going to do, he does have slick submissions off of his back. I just hugely question his opponents. And Timothy Johnson, while his resume or his wins kind of aren't that impressive. What is he in the UFC? 50-50? He's 3-2 in the UFC with his losses coming to Jared Rosholt and Alexander Volkov.
Thanks.
But his resume is just way better. He's definitely going to try to wrestle Albini and get him to the ground. But I also think that he's this guy that looks like Joe Blow off the street, kind of looks like a police officer. But he's got his hands are a lot faster than he looks like he should have. Like he was a counter uppercut on Volkov in the first round or something that might have hurt Volkov. I think that Timothy Johnson is a little bit underrated. I don't understand why Albini is here. I think that Timothy Johnson wins in all areas, but perhaps I'm just being buffaloed by Albini's shitty level of competition. What do you think?
Man, I agree with you. I think I messaged you earlier. It's funny. I didn't even see your tweet. I thought the same thing. I've been watching some tape on Albini. I don't know. Albino. Albini. He's just not that great, man. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, the only thing that I liked about his game is that once he gets on top of you, if he takes you down to the ground, he's very good and active with landing shots. And he's also really crafty at throwing up submissions off his back. But besides that, he's going up against an all-state American wrestler, or an all-American wrestler, that's what I probably should say. From D2, Timothy Johnson's got great wrestling abilities, even though he doesn't utilize it a whole lot in his fights. He's also got a great body lock clinch that he likes to utilize, a lot of top pressure when he's up there pushing you over, and he's got a powerful right hand. Timothy Johnson's striking is kind of underrated, knowing how powerful some of his bombs that he's got. I think he knocked out Daniel Omielanchuk in his UFC debut, but I question his fight IQ. He actually almost had Rosholt knocked out in that third round with like 30 seconds left, but then he looked for a takedown, and I was like, man, what are you doing, man? You shouldn't be going for a takedown. I mean, you have this guy literally one of the worst chins and one-dimensional fighters in the sport, and you're going to take him down with 30 seconds left when you have him pretty much knocked out on the feet in a fight that he was definitely losing, and he did lose. But I question that about him. But it's fighting a guy that I'm just not impressed with. Albini is not impressive with watching his film. You all can go watch it. I mean, I may be being hard on the guy, but he's very slow with his punches. He's got a sloppy striking technique that he just kind of throws looping punches that don't really connect sometimes. But besides the reason I said, that's the only good things about him are when he's on top or when he's on bottom. And going up against Timothy Johnson, I don't think we're going to see if Timothy Johnson lands takedowns, I think he'd be smart enough to avoid the submission. So I'm taking Timothy Johnson, thinking a knockout, but I picked the decision in the end just because if Timothy Johnson can utilize his wrestling, I think he'll take a pretty clear 30-27. But I feel like a knockout is definitely a possibility.
Daniel LB said in the comments, watch Timothy Johnson get stretched. That would be our luck. We're talking so much smack on Albini, and he just comes in there and lights Johnson up. That'd be our luck, right?
I mean, it definitely could happen. I thought Travis Brown was definitely going to beat Alexei Oleinik, and that sure didn't happen. But I guess they're heavyweight, so that's one thing too to think about.
Right, yeah. We were the comment section's chatting about, if the fight goes on long, we could see a couple of heavy guys sloppily trying to take each other down in a snooze fest, kind of like we saw last week with Willis versus Mulheron. Man, that fight fucking sucked. I hope we don't. If this is like the second That's going to suck for everybody that's involved. And Jeremy Brigham says, that's a bathroom break? Nah, man. BEERRUN. If you know what I'm saying. So look out for this fight to be a beer run for you. Timothy Johnson. What were the odds here? Tim Johnson, -235. Albini, +195. Okay, here's the thing. Wes, if you're super confident in Junior Bacon Cheeseburger, let's put him in here at -245. And let's put Timothy Johnson in here at -235. You parlay those guys together, just a 2-leg parlay, and you're going to get it at even money +101. If we're super confident in both guys, you're getting at plus money. And again, do not take me seriously as being a gambler or a guy who's giving gambling advice. I'm just out here spitting baloney. But Eric Stevens says staying away from Johnson Albino. I think Johnson might be in this parlay I just made. I think that sounds pretty decent. What do you think?
I mean, I like it. And maybe I'm saying that because I'm really confident in Timothy Johnson and I wasn't impressed with Junior Albini. But then again, I mean, like I said, they're heavyweights. I feel like anything can happen, so maybe Albini can pull off something crazy. But then again, a lot of his victories, pretty much all of them, have come by submission. He's got a couple by knockouts, but they're over guys who don't really have the best record. But I don't know. I feel like it may be a good and reasonable bet. I'm not sure.
USA, folks, is parlay just another word for bet? Just you put two bets together and you get better odds because it's more risky because you got two of them. Anyway, let's talk about the next fight. Shane Hurricane Burgos versus Godofredo Pepe. So I don't know his last name. It's probably it's Castro, but it's so funny on UFC.com. They say Godofredo Pepe, and they put the nickname and also the last name. Just like Henan Barao, Henan the Baron Barao. Barao means the Baron. So they're saying Henan the Baron. So stupid. Any hoozles. The odds have Shane Burgos at -370. The comeback on Godofredo Pepe at +310. I want to say something quick. Burgos trains with Tiger Schulman. So he's with Lyman Good and also Jimmie Rivera. So 3 guys on this card from that same camp. And there's the 3 positive C's for Shane Burgos: confidence, control, and counters. He's a guy that comes in there, obviously super confident. He controls the center of the octagon, and then he's going to look to counter you. So there's my 3 C's. He will lead the dance, but he mostly wants to counter. There's one negative C, and that's check. The dude just doesn't check leg kicks at all. Just fuck it. You kick me in the leg, I'm going to punch you in the face with a super hard punch. But Godofredo Pepe, super exciting fighter, likes to throw looping shots. This is another contender for fight of the night, in my opinion. If we were to give each fight an individual letter grade, I would give this one an A+, just on the level of excitement it's going to bring. But who you picking?
Yeah, I agree, man. This is definitely like an A+ kind of fight. And I've been back and forth to this one. And I don't know if I've ever told you, but I really like Godofredo Pepe. He's actually been one of my favorite featherweights in the division. I've always enjoyed watching this guy fight just because he goes out there guns a-blazing, looking for that impressive finish. But I've been back and forth on this one. I just don't know if I can pick him. And Godofredo Pepe, he's got really no initiation for takedowns, but he's great off his back. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's got numerous credentials, having competed in it. He's only got 1 decision win in the UFC, and his last 4 victories that all were in the UFC have come by round 1 finish. And one of them was over Andre Fili. He's pretty tough. We saw Noah Lahat, Deshaun Johnson, and Mike De La Torre all get finished there in the first round. But he lacks a lot of striking technique, but he carries so much power that he goes out there when he swings. I mean, it's pretty much like an ape. I don't know how else to describe it. Like when you see like King Kong, he's like King Kong when he's throwing his punches, the way that he throws his arms out. And
he throws them from his hip, man, just fucking swinging.
And that's one thing that he was able to utilize to hurt Mike De La Torre in that fight. And he also had Darren Elkins hurt in like 15 seconds in that fight. He threw a spinning hook kick that landed. But he made a lot of technical mistakes that cost him in that fight. There were definitely moments where he could have been able to get a finish, maybe with strikes, maybe with submissions, but just not really the best fight IQ. And that's one thing that's cost him in his losses, as he did have 2 back-to-back, one to Felipe Arantes, and the other was to Sam Cecilia. But Shane Burgos, you mentioned it. He doesn't check any leg kicks. We saw Charles Rose lean quite a bit. He also carries his hand pretty low. They're both around his midsection, which leaves his head wide open, even though he hasn't got hit a whole lot in his fights, going up against a pretty powerful striker like Godofredo Pepe, who's pretty unpredictable and unorthodox with what he throws. Could be risky, but he carries massive power, and he's got great straight shots, good jabs, good hooks. Burgos, with those counters, as you mentioned, is very powerful. I feel like it's a 50-50 kind of fight. I was tempted to pick Godofredo by submission because we've never seen Shane in any real danger of submission threats besides Charles Rosa like once or twice maybe. But Pepe is very unpredictable in what he throws, and maybe he can get the victory. But in the end, I picked Shane Burgos. I picked him by a second-round knockout, and I picked him because his striking, as I mentioned, is powerful. We've seen Pepe get finished before against strikers, and a lot of the fighters that Godofredo Pepe has fought and beat are fighters that don't really have a lot of volume. And Shane Burgos, I feel like, will have the volume to maybe, if they get into a slugfest, get a finish. But this is a slugfest I think that we're going to see. I feel like it's 50-50 to call. You can pick either one, but I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen because it's going to be a wild fight, but definitely a contender for fight of the night. I wouldn't blink, but in the end, I'm going to be picking Shane Burgos by a second-round finish.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty confident in Shane Burgos here, like a lot of the people in the comment section are as well. I think that you were talking about the looping shots that Godofredo throws. He throws these shots from his hip, and when he does, so he's throwing his right hand with a baseball type of throw, with a really winging, a windmill punch. He also drops his other hand, and that is not good. So he's telegraphing this huge long punch, and he's facing a guy who has incredibly large amounts of power in his hands and is mostly a counter striker. Burgos, his favorite striking combination is a 2-3, so the straight and then the hook, and he will also vary up where the second strike lands, the 3. He will maybe do it to the head, maybe do it to the body, and he's very intelligent on where to throw it, where to pinpoint that thing. And I think that, so even if Godofredo, he's blocking his head while he's throwing a looping shot, his body's going to be open for that 3 to land there. And if he starts to block that body, here comes a powerful left hook right at your face, bro, and you're in trouble for it. You mentioned the fight IQ with Godofredo. He might throw out an attempt to land a flying fucking armbar or something like that and end up on the ground and get ground and pounded out. I think stylistically this is one, yes, it's going to be super fucking fun to watch because they're going to come in there swanging and banging, as Derek Lewis would say. But I think because of the wide looping shots that Pepe throws, they're going to leave him open to counters. Shane Burgos, phenomenal counter puncher. And I don't think the low kicks, I don't think Pepe has enough upstairs to decide to get a game plan where he says, you know what, I'm going to chop Burgos down early with the low kicks because he doesn't check them, and then later I'm going to throw my looping shots. Start of the fight, Pepe's going to come in here, throw in his windmill shots, and I think Burgos is going to be able to counter him. I, too, picked Shane Burgos on my UFC pick'em via KO or TKO in round number 2. Moving on to the first fight of the night, which takes place at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on UFC Fight Pass. It's a rematch from a 2014 fight between Frankie Perez, who's 10-3, and Chris Wade, who is 11-3. The odds have Wade at a much larger favorite than I thought he was going to be, -300. The comeback on Frankie Perez, +250. The first fight back in 2014, Chris Wade won via split decision. There's a couple of intangibles that are important here. Well, maybe it's just one, and that is Frankie Perez already retired once, and that's something that you have to talk about every time you talk about this guy. So John Anik said before his last fight against that really exciting guy who just lost. Who did he just last face? Wes?
Frankie Perez, Mark Diakiese.
Mark Diakiese, yes. So Anik said in the build-up to that when they were walking out that Perez has been training the whole time. He never left the gym. He's still working hard. Sure, man, but I think the main reason he would come back is because he misses making 30 G's a night. I know that's low pay for getting your face punched in, but it's 15 minutes and you can make 30 G's. I mean, I think that he probably missed that a little bit, so that's why he unretired. And I'm kind of mad at him too, because after he defeated Sam Stout and he retired as a super young guy after getting his first victory in the UFC, I was like, yes, finally somebody. They go off on a win. They go off as a young person. They can save some of their brain cells. Dumbass is coming back. Anyway, so Chris Wade, he's a collegiate wrestler and he has this wrestling background. And I also think that he throws in more abundance. He throws way more strikes at a time than Frankie Perez does. Now, Frankie, he's got great movement. He's very fluid. He looks relaxed out there. He's kind of like Gumby-like and how loose and stuff he is. No octagon jitters for this guy. Very calm. Like, I'm more nervous doing this fight show than it looks like this guy is in the octagon. He moves well. He throws really good kicks. He's a long striker. The problem is he throws one at a time, and I don't think that he has very good wrestling defense. I think that the abundance of striking techniques and the dynamism with which Chris Wade is going to be attacking him with, on top of the fact that Chris Wade could get this fight to the ground, be on top of Frankie Perez, where Perez, he has good jiu-jitsu apparently, and he's kind of comfortable on his back, and he doesn't have great fight IQ either. He went for a flying triangle or a flying armbar against Mark Diakiese after he had already been being wrestled for X amount of time. So against a guy who's already put you on your back and held you there for, I don't know, let's say 5 minutes, why in the world would you try a flying fucking armbar? I don't like the fight IQ of Frankie Perez. I don't like the takedown defense. I don't like that he doesn't throw very many strikes in combination. I've got Chris Wade via wrestling and volume. What do you think?
Exactly. I mean, I 100% agree with your breakdown. The only thing, though, is that neither really have a lot of momentum going. Chris Wade, he's lost his last two, both to people that like to grapple and look for takedowns. Frankie Perez, he's 1-2 in the UFC. But I noticed it too, man. He retired after he knocked out Sam Stout, and I thought it was a great move. And then he decides he's going to come back. Ended up fighting Mark Diakiese and lost that fight. So, but his last UFC win came in August of 2015, approaching 2 years. And then before that, it was in 2014, in September. He beat Tommy Marcelino in the World Series of Fighting. So it's hard to pick him, especially knowing the fact that Chris Wade already has one up on him. He's also very susceptible to takedowns, which is an area that Chris Wade excels at, knowing that he's a predominant wrestler. He's a 2-time college wrestling All-American. He's also got beautiful hip tosses. You can go and watch some of his fights. He's really good at implementing them in his fights, especially early on. He's got poor to hit takedown defense too. That's one thing that I've noticed. But he doesn't really have a whole lot of striking output, but sometimes he implements it well, especially when he gets on top. And he's also undefeated as an amateur kickboxer. He's got a great switch kick, and he ended up knocking down what's his name, Rustam Kabalov in that fight. In the second round, he was able to land a switch kick to the jaw that I feel it could have knocked some people out. Pretty similar to like what Chito Vera did, but a switch kick instead of just a standing kick. So he's a pretty underrated striker as well, despite getting tagged a couple times in some of his fights. But I do like Chris Wade in this one. I'll just end it there. I think that he's going to take a pretty dominant decision. If those new rules are in effect, maybe a 30-26. I may be a little just overconfident in that, but I just don't really trust where Frankie Perez is with his mental state, knowing the fact that he already announced a retirement and then he decided he wanted to come back. It's just, I'm not really sure where he's going to be at in this fight, knowing the fact already, as I mentioned, that Chris Wade has one up on him, having already beat him once prior.
Daniel Morabian in the comment section said that his locks of the card are LaFlare and Wade. If you were to parlay them together, it's just a 2-team parlay. I like two-leg parlays or accumulators. That's plus 104. So maybe that's an option. The reason I've been saying a lot of parlays, again, don't take my betting advice. I'm just saying, lately, I've been doing well with parlays. I haven't been doing well on picking heavy favorites, laying the chalk. I haven't been doing well with picking underdogs to get the victory. But I've been doing really good with parlaying guys right around minus 200. So maybe that's something that all you fight fans should look into. So that covers the entire night of fights. You can join our UFC Pick'em League. Just search for MMA Mania on UFC Pick'em, or maybe I'll put a link in the description box or comment section down below so you guys can play with us. Anyway, let's get into so we're both predicting Rivera versus Almeida as fight of the night. Is that right, Wes?
That's right.
Okay, so who are you predicting wins performance bonuses?
Man, I've been back and forth on this one. I'm not really 100% confident, but I'm looking at who I picked by finishes, and I'm going to go with Kelvin Gastelum. I feel like no matter who wins in that fight, if somebody gets a finish, we'll see a performance given. And my second one is actually going to go to Eryk Anders. I'm pretty confident in him. I'm pretty high on him too. Maybe I'm overrating him a little bit, but I know Rafael Natal's been knocked out 5 times, and Eryk Anders has quite a bit of knockouts, so maybe he can get it done in the first.
I'm going to go with Rivera and Kelvin Gastelum to get my performance bonuses. So normally, for those of you that are here with us right now, I would go into talking about geeked outside of mixed martial arts, something that we've been excited about in the past 7 days or so. I'm going to skip that for this week. We've gone on for an hour and 40 minutes already, which that's quite a long time. So, but soon I want to do a show with Wesley here, who plans to be my co-host every time we do Fight Nerds. But I want to do a question show on an off week. So in August, there's only one UFC fight card, but of course there are 2 major events. There's obviously on August 26th, you guys might have heard about it, Floyd Money Mayweather versus Conor McGregor on August 26th. So on those off weeks when we do Fight Nerds, I want to do shows where we can answer your questions. Any type of question, what kind of pizza would I recommend? I brew home brewed beer. Ask me a question about how to brew some home brewed beer. But why I'm saying this is on Twitter. Hit us both up and ask questions. But you can follow Wesley at All That MMA. I'm at Flying Brian J. But use the hashtag Fight Nerds, and that's how I will find the tweets later on. I'll just search for Fight Nerds, and I'll find them. We'll pull them. We'll do a whole show for that. So I want to prepare you guys right now to get those in for later. But as for right now, that's pretty much the end of the show, right, Wes? Thanks so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm glad to be hopefully be able to do these every week. I'm planning on not having a lot going on Wednesdays, so I appreciate you for wanting me to be your co-host, and I really appreciate that, man. And I thank everybody for tuning in. I really enjoy doing these podcasts and hanging out with you, man. And I appreciate watching and checking out all the comments. So this should be a pretty good weekend. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss it, so I won't be around for any of the preamble or the rearview mirror. But I love talking fights, and I really appreciate it again. Thanks, Brian, for having me on the show.
Again, follow Wes on Twitter at All That MMA. Search for him on Facebook at All That MMA too. I'm assuming you can read his work at MMAsucka.com. If you liked the show but don't have time to listen to the whole thing in the future, and you'd rather listen to an audio version without looking at my face, I know I'm not very pretty, but you can subscribe to MMA Mania on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, iVoodoo, Player FM, TuneIn Radio. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can subscribe to MMA Mania. So please subscribe to us there. And if you have time, no pressure, please give us a rating. I don't care if it's a 1-star, a 5-star. Just do it and then tell us why. I could always try to make the show a little bit better. I appreciate you all for watching. I'll see you guys, as Wesley mentioned, on Saturday, right before the card starts, about an hour before it starts, to do the MMA preamble, where we will talk more about the fight card. And then after the fight card, immediately after the main event winner is interviewed, I'll be back for the rearview mirror, and I will see you guys on Saturday. Namaste.